with all of that pressure, she feels that she needs to go back and kidnap her own father.
The ERG and the CAB. We've talked a little bit about these two organizations and how they play a role in the world level events of our novel. And today we're going to talk about how some of their flaws reflect things that we see in our culture today. This is going to be a little bit of a spoiler episode. We're going to talk about some of the large scale plot points, some things we haven't mentioned here before, some things that are new and may or may not stick around through the final part of the story, but we're going to look into some of the details of what is wrong about these organizations.
You mentioned ERG and CAB. That stands for Epoch Research Group and the Knowledge Acceleration Board, and even the way that they got their names as we've been exploring things, those might not even stick around. But as I was looking through the large world level, story level plot over the past few weeks, some of it changed a little bit, and we're looking at two different timelines of history. One of them was predominantly controlled by the ERG, and their tendency was to give people a lot of autonomy, freedom, and flexibility, and anonymity, really. Let people discover whatever they want. And as we explored some of the details of how that was going to show up, one of the things that we thought would make a really interesting world level idea was a blockchain-like private place where people who sponsored this organization could put little micro tasks that they wanted to be complete, and people could earn credit for their credit of funding for their kind of research if they would do these micro tasks that served the larger ERG organization. And the requesting of the micro tasks was anonymous, and the fulfillment of the micro tasks was anonymous, but it was a way to get funding for your projects. And as we were exploring one of the things in that particular timeline, one of our main characters discovers that one of the things she knows about her past is that her father just disappeared when she was young. And she's looking through this list of microtasks, and she's able to piece together that somebody is trying to recruit a project to go back in time and kidnap her father. And so she decides that in order to prevent whatever danger she foresees happening to her father, with all of that pressure, she feels that she needs to go back and kidnap her own father. And that was one of the areas that we saw in the ERG, and the way that could be derailed, in that there's a lot of nefarious things going on because there is such an emphasis on anonymity. There is no accountability for what's happening.
And the bad things such as kidnapping somebody, that's not even the worst of it. You're seeing things like assassinations and other things that are occurring because there's complete anonymity, and sometimes the people working on the tasks are small enough that they don't even realize the part that they are playing in this massive criminal scheme that's going on.
They have learned to trust the ERG as an organization, as an organization that does good, but there's so much emphasis on anonymity and privacy in that case that people are enabled to do these nefarious things.
And then we look at the other side, at the CAB, a group that originally was going to be the protagonist group, mm-hmm. and the one that people were aspiring to be more like. And then we're realizing as we're going that no, they have some flaws too. And their flaws are kind of the opposite side, where instead of having way too much anonymity and freedom, they are a little overzealous on forcing accountability for things.
And this was, the first timeline where the erg is in control leads to a logical conclusion that is disastrous. So they go back in time, try to change things. We're not going to make that mistake again. They go to the other extreme. They try to force this level of extreme accountability and heavy-handedness, and now privacy goes out the window, and so we're on opposite extremes. And you observed in our previous conversation, hey, that's an awful lot like what we talked about in a previous video about the paradoxical strengths of accountability and privacy. And the solution is not to see them as opposite ends of a spectrum, which is what happens, I think, today. All of these very positive strengths seem to be heavily associated with opposite ends of a spectrum. It's the right versus the left. It's the conservatives versus the liberals. And certain strengths tend to be associated with liberals. Certain strengths tend to be associated with conservatives. And we end up learning to see them as opposite ends of a spectrum rather than being two axes on the same graph where one can be strong in both.
Yeah, those are some ways that we see the organizations in our novel reflecting a little bit of what we see in culture, with those strengths that are not opposite ends of a spectrum, but seemingly opposite ends of a spectrum, but can actually work together. And that is the end goal that really should be accomplished. There is with those groups in our novel having both a proper amount of anonymity, of privacy, and accountability, both working together. But we see the flaws in being too heavy-handed on one, and some of the consequences of that work we'll explore as well. So our question for you today is, what are some flaws in fictional organizations that take patterns from modern society and to the extreme? Let us know some examples of that you can think of, and we will see you in a couple weeks.